The U.S. wall stretches for hundreds of miles along Mexico's northern border on the southern edge of the United States. The wall divides clean water from contaminated water, wealth from poverty, people who were fortunate enough to be born in a country of prosperity from people who were not. In 2005, there was a proposal to construct a wall along the entire U.S.-Mexico border. Questions about how effective it would be, along with the prohibitive cost of erecting a 2,000-mile fence, have led to the creation of several shorter fences. Today, physical walls are concentrated around populated regions. In the city of Nogales, the wall curves in toward Mexico. At Agua Prieta, large metal poles curve out above the United States. In some locations, the wall is built from recycled military materials. In others, it is no more than an old-fashioned barbed wire fence. In some places, there is no physical barrier at all. The presence of walls in well-populated areas pushes many Hispanic migrants away from the safety of urban centers to enter the United States out in the wilderness, where they are less likely to be caught. One of the most common places for migrants to cross is the Sonora Desert, which boasts hotter temperatures than any other desert in North America. In the summer, temperatures rise to 115 degrees or higher. In the winter, nighttime lows will fall below freezing. At certain times of the year, the temperature can change 60 degrees in a single day. Throughout this region, water is scarce. In many places, plants grow no more than a few feet from the ground. Shade is impossible to come by. A foreboding place, the desert is home to jaguars, scorpions, and western diamondback rattlesnakes, which account for more bites than any other poisonous snake in the United States each year. Yet each year, hundreds of thousands of people, children, women, and men, still migrate across this desert on foot in search of food, jobs, security, even wealth. Since the United States began tightening security, more than 4,500 people have died attempting to cross Mexico's U.S. border. Had these people lived at a different time in Mexico's history, their stories might have come to a better end. 2 centuries after the Americas were recolonized, the Spanish, not the English, claimed most of the territory west of the Mississippi. As late as 1844, a wall along Mexico's U.S. border was not in the economic interests of the United States. In 1845, U.S. President James K. Polk attempted to buy the West from Mexico, but Mexico refused to sell. The United States declared war, and Mexico was forced to cede the land. Over the course of the 20th century, 3 historical developments brought major waves of Hispanic migrants to the U.S. During the Mexican Revolution, refugees of war headed north to flee violence in the early 1900s. 3 decades later, while many U.S. farmers fought overseas, the U.S. government invited Mexican workers north to replenish the country's depleted workforce. Following World War II, Mexico's economy grew. In the 1950s and 60s, Mexicans saw the rise of a middle class. Then came a series of economic crises. Between 1970 and 1994, Mexico's economy collapsed 3 separate times. These collapses set off another wave of Hispanic migration, this time to escape the poverty of Mexico to build a better life in the land of opportunity.
Se había puesto la situación sumamente crítica.
The first time I crossed, I was 8 months pregnant. Life was very difficult in Nogales. My husband would work for 3 days and then have no job. He would work all day from 8 in the morning to 8 at night, but it wasn't enough. We'd have food for 3 days and then we'd have nothing. We decided to cross when my daughter got sick, and I knew it was from lack of nourishment. That's a very intense pain, seeing your child cry because she's hungry and having nothing to give her. She was 2 years old, and I was already pregnant with another. My husband had papers to cross, but he had them to cross with me and our daughter.
Muy poco trabajo y
It is hard to earn enough money to support a family. My brother got a job and had children, but it was difficult to pay for a house and school. He wasn't making enough money, so he went to California. There he rented a house, got a job, and established himself. Then he sent for his family. They've been there 18 years now, and they're used to the life there.
Stories like these are not unique. The dream of escaping poverty persists, and it is easy to see the different standards of living from one side of the border to the other. In Nogales, Mexico, 10 minutes south of the border, thousands of people live in cardboard, plywood, and other makeshift dwellings. In Douglas, Arizona, 10 minutes north of the U.S. wall, the main streets of the city could be mistaken for any affluent Midwestern town. These situations repeat themselves in many places along the border, where a safer, more sanitary, and secure quality of life seems to await anyone who can make it to the northern side. Ironically, these kinds of discrepancies, which drive the current trend of migration, were supposed to be eliminated by a new open border economy in the early 1990s. This open border economy was consummated when NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, went into effect on the 1st of January 1994. Leading up to its implementation, many Mexicans expected NAFTA to spur the rise of a new middle class and make Mexico's economy as strong as the economy of the United States.
I lived in Mexico when the Free Trade Agreement went into effect. We were saying for about a year before that the Free Trade Agreement was going to bring Mexico and Canada and the U.S. Onto a fair playing field, an even playing field. And my friends, my professional friends in Mexico said, finally Mexico's coming into the first world. And I had a friend who said, I grew up on I Love Lucy, and finally I'm going to have that life of I Love Lucy.
The reality was quite different. By removing barriers to trade and investment, NAFTA allowed large corporations to ship jobs out of the U.S. to countries like Mexico, where they could ignore health regulations, pay lower wages, and workers were kept from forming unions. NAFTA also paved the way for massive conglomerates to buy what used to be communal farmland. Mexicans who once grew their own food lost the land to grow it on, and Mexicans who once ran small companies were put out of work, unable to compete with the lower prices and services offered by multinational corporations. An excess of labor was created. Some of these laborers now work for the very companies that put them out of business. People flock to cities in search of jobs at new giant factories, creating overpopulation, social upheaval, and sanitation nightmares. Already displaced from their homes, those who do not find work often continue their migration north, with or without paperwork. Others travel straight to the U.S. to find employment as soon as they lose their jobs. By pushing so many workers out of Mexico and into the United States illegally, companies in the U.S. now benefit from cheaper labor here, where undocumented workers and even Mexicans who get visas are frequently paid less than native citizens. The owners of vast corporations become billionaires, and Mexico's federal financial reserves go up. But blue-collar workers from both countries suffer. For Mexico, this process has also caused the near elimination of the middle class free trade was supposed to support.
This middle class has been the one that has been most affected by the economic crisis, because now they are not able to save money as they could in the past. They are not able to have the same small businesses that they could in the past. And now you have that those small businesses now are negatively affected by the establishment of huge monopolies, huge stores. We can, for example, mention the establishment of Walmarts or similar commercial establishments that don't allow for the small businesses to prosper. NAFTA has generated wealth for Mexico. The problem is that NAFTA has not been complemented by a policy for more equitable schemes of distribution of that wealth that has been generated. The income of a worker, what we would call the blue-collar worker in Mexico, is at the level of prior 1970 for the typical Mexican worker who can be working the same hours that was working, let's say, in the 1960s. There has not been a gain at all. And he's not going to benefit from reading in the newspapers that Mexico has now more reserves than ever in the past.
Spurred by low wages, poor working conditions, disrupted lifestyles, inadequate social services, and unemployment, the Hispanic exodus continues. In certain regions, a whole generation of working men disappears for months at a time as they search for seasonal employment. Along with the difficulty of parting with their families, migrants must also come up with the money to cross to the United States. To obtain a visa to work in the U.S. legally costs thousands of dollars, depending upon the length of stay. U.S. codes limit the number of Mexicans who are granted this status and include several restrictions that hamper any path to legal citizenship.
U.S. immigration law is designed to do two major things. Firstly is to focus on family unity, which basically to bring other family members of current U.S. citizens or permanent residents. And the other category is the professional or rich people with money or resources. Our immigration system focuses on bringing the most educated people, the most talented people, and the most rich people from all over the world. And definitely these categories of immigration bears a significant challenge for a poor Mexican.
With avenues to legal migration blocked, fathers, brothers, sisters, and families decide to cross illegally. Undocumented migrants will pay human smugglers, known as coyotes, as much as $3,000 to take them to the northern side. Paths for crossing the border are often well known. Because migrants travel with money and possessions, thieves lie in wait to rob them as they pass. To make matters worse, coyotes cannot always be trusted. Some migrants are forced to carry marijuana or other drugs to the United States as part of their payment. But many take the risk. With border fences driving them into the wilderness to cross, it is easy to get lost in the desert. So it is worth almost anything to work with experienced smugglers. Most of the crossings take place at night, when desert predators are on the move. Migrants who have been deported warn others to watch out for the abundance of snakes. The Sonora Desert is riddled with rocks and holes. In the dark of night, it is easy to turn an ankle. But the coyotes do not chance slowing down for one injured migrant. Anyone who gets hurt or becomes sick on the journey will be left behind. Desert temperatures climb well above 100 degrees. Standing in the sand, you can feel the heat rise through your shoes. As the journey becomes more difficult, people discard extra weight. Empty bottles of water litter the desert floor. The frontier looks the same in most directions. Navigating through brush and shrubs, it is impossible to walk a straight line. And the sun is deceptive as a guide. Migrants report passing human bones and even bodies while crossing.
We saw 2 dead people in the desert. They had died recently. They still looked alive. The coyotes tried to hurry us and make us go faster, but I couldn't. They had promised we would only walk 6 hours, but they lied. 3 days in, we still had a long way to go. I said, it is better for me to stay here because I won't make it. I'm going to die. The group left, they said. Do what you want. When Border Patrol picked us up, we still were not halfway there.
Motion detector fences and Border Patrol agents monitor the boundary 24 hours a day. For migrants who get hurt, lost, or abandoned, the Border Patrol is a welcome sight. Defeated by the desert, many people turn themselves in willingly if they are fortunate enough to be found. Crosses and shrines to honor the dead can be found on both sides of the border. In Tucson, Arizona, this shrine portrays shoe prints of all sizes, a witness to the children, women, and men who have walked into the wilderness in search of a better life, thousands of whom will not return. For those who make it to the U.S. safely, a new set of challenges awaits. For Mexicans, the family has long been one of the most significant social institutions, with close relationships often extending beyond children and parents to include grandparents and other relatives. A large number of migrants regularly send a portion of their paychecks back to Mexico to care for their family. But as people are separated for significant periods of time, even close relationships are strained and sometimes broken.
I was separate from my family when I came here. I feel terrible leaving them. I love my family, and I will not trade anything for my family.
As time goes by, it is not uncommon for families to be torn apart completely. Phone calls and letters are often the only way to stay in touch, and migrants form new social networks in the communities they live in. Some husbands leave Mexico to support their children and wife, then meet another woman while they are gone, remarry, and begin a new family in the United States. Even to locate a relative who left Mexico illegally is extremely difficult. Most undocumented migrants quickly establish new identities, including falsified names, driver's licenses, and social security cards. At any time, hundreds of migrants may claim the same social security number. Many pay social security taxes, though they will never be awarded any benefits. Despite the relative strength of the U.S. economy, migrant life is not as wealthy or secure as many people dream it will be.
The second time we tried, we were successful and came to Tucson. I was hopeful because we had family there who were U.S. citizens. I thought they might help us, but they only let us stay with them for 2 weeks. We begged on the streets for a while. Then we got help from a church. For one day, we stayed in a really nice hotel. The next night, we slept outside the church. We would wake up in the morning, and my youngest daughter would be beaten all over by ants. I would find ants in her diaper when I changed her.
You never have the same treatment. When you do not have the right papers, it is hard being illegal. You know, it's never the same as for people who were born here or have their papers. I don't know if it is that people think we are invaders. I don't know if it is the laws right now. But you feel like you are always fearful, feeling like people are following you all the time.
This is really hard right now. In a week, I will say we work 2 days, maybe 3 maximum. I came here to work. To try and save a little money that I cannot make in my country. You work more there and you make even less.
Untold numbers of migrants struggle to find steady work. Countless people wander the streets or go to designated pickup sites each day, hoping someone will hire them to perform an odd job, not knowing where they will work or even if they will work from one day to the next. Migrants who do find work typically receive less pay than Caucasians who perform similar tasks. This double wage system makes it harder for migrants to make ends meet, but they will still bring in as much as 7 times the amount they would be paid for the same work in Mexico. Some employers knowingly take advantage of undocumented workers, paying them much lower wages or requiring money back from their checks. Migrants tell of muggings at ATMs in which criminals target people without visas because they have no legal recourse.
It's difficult for a Mexican to leave Mexico. And when you get to the US, it's even more difficult to make something of yourself, to earn a bit of money. It's unjust that we suffer so much to achieve the American dream and then be humiliated, maltreated, and not get what we deserve. We don't come to the US to take away people's benefits. We come to earn money and to work hard, and we have to double the amount of work the Americans do just to make it.
Given the opportunity, many migrants will learn the English language. In addition to exploitation, cultural differences, and the isolation of being separated from their families, those who do not learn English will be alienated from the majority of U.S. citizens by the language they speak. In the past, most Hispanic migrants have not desired or needed to assimilate to life above the border. As a historical phenomenon, Hispanic migration has tended to be temporary, only for particular seasons, and cyclical, with most migrants remaining in the United States for no more than 1 year. In a strange twist of fate, the construction of the U.S. wall to keep migrants out also traps in migrants who are already here. Fearing the dangers associated with crossing and recrossing the more secured border, migrants who used to return to Mexico for certain seasons of the year now stop going home and put down permanent roots in the United States. Once settled, people who left Mexico as seasonal migrant workers become immigrants, lifelong inhabitants of a new land. But for those who fled their home country without the proper documents, it is not possible to settle completely. Getting married, raising children, and building a life offers no protection against arrest. No matter how many years go by, families wonder if they will one day be separated by deportation. On August 28, 2007, all the way in Fairfield, Ohio, more than 160 illegally documented migrants were arrested while at work for a chicken plant. Several had been employed at the factory for 2 to 3 years, and some had risen to the position of supervisor. News of the raid spread quickly across the area. Wives and children waited to learn if their fathers and husbands, who were typically the primary source of income for the family, were among those who had been arrested. Afraid they could be picked up next, many migrants, both legal and illegal, went into hiding.
Many children were at home alone and they were very scared. Then there was the news that their parents were going to be deported, so there was a separation for them. Some of the children were born in the US, and they thought this was their country. Then they discovered that even though they were born here, they were not from here, and they were very confused. Many families are still nervous. They are afraid to go to the store and even to church because they think they are being followed.
Soon after the raid, a small number of nearby churches opened their buildings to give uneasy Hispanics a safe place to stay. One of them, led by Reverend Larry Krebs, had recently studied the economic causes of Hispanic migration.
When I got the phone call that afternoon, I wasn't really sure what we were getting into, but I was sure about our mission. Just the previous Sunday, we had a combined adult Sunday school class for a discussion about immigration rights. And it had been a very informative time. It examined a lot of the complexities of the issues. It went way beyond the sound bites, so that given the mission of our congregation and that people had been studying, it felt real good to say, yes, come.
If I was in their situation, I would do the same thing for my family. I would come here to try to make a life that is better for them and to try to send money back to my relatives. And I think that if we put ourselves squarely in the middle of this situation and say, what if this was me? You would say the same thing.
One of the things that I did learn was that the people who come here are often here because they suffered economic disability as a result, perhaps, of the North American Free Trade Agreement. When we send tons of agricultural products to their country, they no longer can deal with that competition. And consequently, they ended up tractored off their land, and they came here looking for an opportunity. We need to take a look as a society, not only of this country, but of North America and Central America, so that we can do what is best for all of us together.
Sharing this sense of the worth of all people, Christian and other humanitarian organizations work to ease the suffering of migrants along the border. No Más Muertes, which means no more deaths, sets up medical stations near the wall to provide a place for deported migrants to receive basic care.
And this is a gate, a port of entry where people are repatriated, brought back to Mexico. after they're picked up in the desert, or people who are picked up during deportation raids around the country. We have our aid station here because people are brought back many times in various stages of dehydration. Many people have been walking through the desert for 3, 4, 5 days at a time without sufficient food and water. Often people also are returned with badly sprained ankles or knees and bad blisters. We try to meet their needs with medical attention as well as give food and water. Everyone coming back is hungry.
Some migrants stay just long enough to regain their strength, then set out to re-enter the United States. Others leave to return to their former homes in Mexico or even countries farther south. Regardless of where they lived before coming to the U.S., deported migrants get dropped off in designated areas just south of the border. With migrants coming to them on their way north and deportees taken to them on their way south, border cities explode in population, and their economies have little hope of supporting the influx of people. Deportees who find themselves in a strange city with no job, no money to return home with, and no work to return to, are faced with heading north again or resigning to a life in poverty. Migrant resource centers like this one provide a way for deported migrants to get back on their feet.
Our goal is to help deported migrants by giving them water, coffee, juice, and food. Above all, we give them information about the resources they can use if they do not have a place to stay or they do not have the means to make a phone call to their home. We send them to the Grupus Beta, who offers them a 50% bus discounts to return to their homes and permits them a phone call either to Mexico or to the US.
Some organizations go even farther to alleviate the problems associated with migration. Establishments like Fair Trade Coffee and Café Justo take steps to reduce the cause of migration by creating middle-class jobs in Mexico.
In the US, a cup of coffee can cost $3, $4, or even $5. We saw that the business of coffee was a profitable one. There are good earners in the business, but they never reach the farmers themselves. So we wanted to give farmers the opportunity to sell directly to clients without intermediaries. We also decided that members of a cooperative should have social security benefits. The coffee farmers should have medical care. We saw that many people from Guatemala were coming each year to work during the harvest, and we decided that they should be paid a fair wage for their work. There is a great diversity of coffee business, but what sets us apart is that we have a vision, which is to reduce the number of farmers who migrate to the US. This way, through this cooperative, they don't have to migrate. They will stay in their communities and we will create jobs for them.
The people of Café Justo are not the only ones who want workers to stay and build their country's economy. Many Mexicans express frustration with the effects of migration.
I see people crossing and I get upset. People die in the desert and are mistreated. I don't know. I am not in their shoes. I don't know what their specific problems are. They keep crossing, so there must be some pull, even though people keep dying, disappearing, and getting arrested. Only they know why they do it. I'm happy in Mexico. I don't always have what I need, but I am staying here.
There are also opportunities in Mexico. My father has done things well. He did not have to come to the United States to succeed. I will follow his example.
Even with the efforts of a few, much remains to be done before Mexico's economy will support the rise of a true middle class. Economic restructuring, international politics, and the fine print of NAFTA all stand in the way, not to mention the corporations that benefit from the current situation. So the struggle continues. Mexico's economy does not provide for the 109 million people who live there. The United States does not want to be flooded with migrants, but continues to contribute to conditions that cause hundreds of thousands of people to flee from Mexico each year. Unless Mexican or U.S. policies shift dramatically, real improvement to Mexico's standard of living could be years or even decades away. Meanwhile, the ones hurt the most are the everyday people, the blue-collar U.S. workers whose jobs disappear somewhere south of the border, the middle-class Mexicans who lose their businesses to international competition, the impoverished, the hungry, the families torn apart by migration, the moms, dads, sisters, and brothers who search for a better life and constantly struggle with the U.S. wall.